guys, this is Danny with ParTay. So today I want to talk about LUX and foot candles and lumens and what all that means. So as we come close up on our launch, and our launch is, I'm going to have to go ahead and announce today, our launch is probably going to be pushed out about a week. One of my distributors for the PVC is not going to be able to get me in the width that I'd originally requested. So I'm going to reach for another distributor because I need somebody that can get me the material at the cost that I'm looking for 120 inch. That way we can keep the cost down for the customer. All right, so real quick, actually I just want to show you this. Look at that dinosaur. Ooh. That came out of our church. It's an old boardroom projector. It does work. I think it's supposed to be 4,000 lumens or something like that. I'm going to fire it up a little later and see what it does. But anyway, all right, so LUX and lumens. So why does it matter? Well, when you're looking for a screen, you know, you're looking for something that'll work in an environment with lights. Now I want you to look in here, and I'll use this room as an example. You see there's all kinds of ambient light coming in. We've got blinds over there, we've got open window here, we got blinds here, we got open windows here, and you know, it's a nice little bright room. This room here is my brightest. And I think, you know, a couple of comments that I got from people is, you know, how can they tell that this room is bright? I'm going to show you. No way like science to prove it, right? So just want to give you an idea as to how light works, truly works in the projection space, and how not to just look at a space and think that it's really, really bright when it probably isn't as bright as you really think it is. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I want you to look at something. Now, so we'll go back in this room, and when you walk in here, it's not like my pupils dilate or anything. It feels about the same brightness as the other room, maybe with just a couple of closed blinds. But let me get something right here in front of this open window. So if I do a test on this wall over here, it's setting at about 60, 61 lux, right? And we'll talk about lux and conversion to foot candles and all that kind of stuff in the next video. But today I just want you to get introduced to how different walls measure differently for lux. So that was that wall right in front of the window. Now I'm just a few feet away, maybe about 6 feet away from those. And I'll do a test on that, and I'm coming in at roughly, let me get my phone out of the way, about 101 lux. So somewhere in that ballpark, right? So let's move on into this room, and I'll test here against these curtains. We're about somewhere in 120 range lux. Okay. Let's check this wall over here that is sort of the right side of where I display. And look there, that's about 40 lux, so pretty good. Let's go over to this wall. 16 lux. So getting better, right? Now let's go to the side of the wall that I do some of my displays on. Turn the phone here so we can actually see it. So there we go. That's right now at about 100. Tapped out a second ago. Let me get the angle right. I'm covering it with my hand. That's the problem. Sorry, guys. There we go. So we're up in the 189, 190 lux. So much brighter right here on this wall. If I come here to the center of the table where I've done some of my displays before, it's roughly in the 200 ballpark, right? And if I do it on this side, which I've done some displays on, so we're in the 250 to 260 range. So you notice, like, even this area right here is brighter than that wall is right now. A lot of it's because of reflectivity coming off the table. So we'll even do a quick one outside here. So a lot of times you think, well, I'm in a shady area. you know, should do pretty well out here. Why can't I project out here in a shady area? There you go. Look at that. 1300 plus lux out here. If I come on this side of the wall, right now, because of where the sun is, I'm somewhere under 1100 lux. And even if I come over here on the back side of this post where it's nice and dark, right? Look at that. So just because things don't look bright or look bright doesn't mean that they're necessarily that bright, right? Because you would think that wall over there would be brighter than the space right here on the edge of the table, but it's not. It's almost double. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because unless you can actually measure and fully understand your environment, you're going to be guessing at whether or not something will work for your environment. And that's not really a good thing to do, especially when you're spending money, especially if you're spending a lot of money. So what I've set up here is I've got a 1200 lumen bulb, CFL bulb, 1 meter away from the screen. Now, I tested the screen before I turned the projector on. The projector is pushing around 1700, a little over 17 and some change lux at the screen. And that's in line with what it's been rated at. 5,000 is what it comes in the brochure, but it's been tested by a number of folks, and I think the highest it came in at was about 2250, something like that. So I did it on a white background, and it was roughly 17 and some change. The lux coming in from this light, that window, that light, and that window there, and anything from the hallway was registering about 29 at the hottest point of the screen, which was right in here, right about the upper half of the screen. So at this point, you know, the image still retains very well. I'm going to pull this in. So, you know, for this, that's a good bit of light environment in here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on our 1200 lumen bulb. Okay, get it nice and bright there. And let's check the lux at the screen. So if I find my hottest spot, I'm somewhere in about the 86, maybe 90 kind of range. There's higher. So that's one thing, is you got to find right where your highest point is. So we're getting over to about the center of that light. There we go. So there's the center of that light. So we're coming in at about 130, somewhere in the ballpark of 130, some change, right? So that's 1 meter away. I measured it, put that on the floor so I know where to keep it. So that's 1 meter away. And looking at the image, you know, this is still an acceptable image. This would do fine in a lot of the environments that we place screens in, because, you know, the reality is really, really bright spaces, and you're just trying to keep an image that can be articulate, right? May not be optimal for what you like to watch movies on, but, you know, in the broader scope of things, it isn't just about movies. It's about, you know, doing presentations. It's about reading text if you're in a worship center, things like that. So trying to keep all of those things still available to the folks who are actually watching. So I'm going to, hold on. So that gets us an image, so you can see, you know, the image is, you know, it's definitely impacted, but it's not completely degraded. So now let's move up to, I've got another area here where I got it, so we can get to about 300 lux. Let me see if that gets us there. That gets us into the 442 range. Now, this screen is rated up to 500 lux. And here's why. If you look at that, the image at the hottest point of that, this is the point where it starts to become degraded. Okay. For me, once we get up just a couple more lux above this, That's the threshold that I would guarantee. Now, that's not to say that, somebody else wouldn't find more acceptable, or less acceptable. It's really personal taste, right? But for me, this is where it starts to really be impacted. And as you climb from there, I would say that's probably somewhere we get into the thousands. Yeah. So we're getting up around 1200 lux there. And the image is really just sort of it's just something you can make out in the background, but it's not really a good image anymore. So unless you know how a screen is rated for lux, it's going to be really hard for you to judge in your environment whether or not it's going to be good. So give you an example. In this room, if all of this light with the windows and all that stuff registers about 29 lux, which is really in line, because most homes, the wall lux is going to be somewhere between 100 and 200 at its maximum points. In really bright homes, it could be up to 400, but that's really rare. So you're really going to be looking at somewhere in the ballpark of about anywhere from 50 to 150 lux on the walls. And it doesn't matter, guys. It does not matter if those are white walls. Now, you get some reflection back from white walls, so it will, it can give the perception of a much brighter room, and it can actually add some light to the room. But it's not going to jump it up that significant. It's not going to jump it up in the hundreds of lumens. It just doesn't. It's a designer trick so that you can make a room look brighter with lighter colors, right? Doesn't necessarily mean there's any more light coming into that room than there is in this room with the darker walls. The only thing is that these colors, now this is a satin finish, so they do bounce light. You can see that. If it was a matte, it would absorb a lot more light, and it would give the perception that there was less light in this room. So that's just a little bit to talk about lux. I'm going to show you how you break down lux to foot candles and what foot candles are. Essentially, lux and foot candles both measure the same thing. They just go about it in a different way. Foot candles is I believe it's imperial, where your lux is metric standard. So I think I've got that right. I know it. Yeah, sorry. I get myself muddled sometimes, so I apologize. But that's the difference between the two. And then lumen is basically, the origination source, the light that's being emitted. And that's in the radioactive spectrum that we can see. So, I know some of this stuff may be boring to people out there who are just in it for the projection, but you really have to know a little bit about how all of this works in order to select the right projection screen for your environment. And that's how we measure these things when we go out. We're looking for, what is the lux on the walls in the areas that things are going to be placed in. Because the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to, if you're in let's say a church, and your screens are not front facing, they're more angled inward, so that the left side can see the right side screen, the right side can see the left side screen, so you can see the words, you can sing along with the hymns and things like that, right? So those, because they're angled, generally are going to not carry as much lux as the wall just to the right or left of them, because they're angled, right? So as a matter of fact, in one of the gyms recently, the wall lux count was somewhere in about the 150 something range, but the screens were only about 67. So that means you don't necessarily have to go with a really dark screen to really beef up and make it look much better. You can go with a mid-tone gray that'll handle up to, say, 300, 350 lux. You're good to go. And you don't have to necessarily, if you wanted black, you could go black. If you wanted white, it's possible that we could get a white screen that adds more contrast and will handle, because of the diffusing agent, will handle more light. So those are all practical things that have to be considered. So my hope is, as we move forward, we can talk about these kind of things, make it more practical for people, so people aren't just impulse buying based on, wow, that looks so good in your house. Well, keep in mind a lot of the videos, now not all, because you know I've shared people that you know I appreciate and have you know admired myself. Excuse me, but you know a key thing is there's a lot of people out there who stage their product. They're out there to sell. Bottom line, they're out there to sell you a product. They're going to sell it for the highest price that they possibly can. And they're going to stage the product to look good no matter what, because they control all the environmental things around them. They know what it can take, what it can tolerate. I hate it when people show stuff wet. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out there to the community. Don't do that, because it makes everything look much brighter than what it is. Once something dries, even if it's a gloss, it still looks much brighter when it's wet. So, you know, not a good thing to do. But for me, when people stage things like this, all it does is just sort of muddy the water. So as we move forward, I think, you know, my purpose for this channel is let's talk about the real science behind projection, and also some of the more novelty items. You know, what are some of the innovations that we can bring to projection, just from a aesthetic standpoint. You know, there's, to me, it's, the possibilities are somewhat endless as to how cool we can make things. You know, I always go back to, say, Crow's bat screen, right? But there's things like that that can be done that aren't necessarily about the science of projection, but, you know, could be things that are kind of cool and share ideas like that. So if that's what you guys are interested in, I'd really appreciate it if you'd share your thoughts with me. Feel free to email me in the description below. And I hope you guys have a really good day, and I'll be back with one either later tonight or tomorrow. We'll talk about what's the difference between foot candles and LUX. All right? You guys have a good day. Bye.